On this episode, we talk about criticism and how do you handle it.
Boo! Rubbish! Get off! Rubbish! Hello and welcome to TGI Monday. Thank you for watching us again this week. We've got a great question this week. Someone has sent in anonymously, which is absolutely fine. If you'd rather do that, you can email us and just ask us not to use your name. This is the question: how do you deal with negativity and criticism? I think I'm going to start for a change, if that's all right, guys. I had an experience a few weeks ago which just really relates to this question. There was some really quite unpleasant criticism. So I just thought I'd tell you what I did. So the first thing I did was go home and cry quite a lot. You know, sometimes someone says something and at the time you just sort of take it, and then it's not till you go home and think about it and then you suddenly realise you're crying and actually it was really negative and really hurtful. So there was quite a lot of crying. And then I talked to some friends, people who know me really well, people who I trust, and said, look, this is what they said. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's right? Do you think my response is okay? And I think that's really important to just weigh the criticism and let other people help you do that, because we don't want to just assume that it's all wrong. You know, sometimes we have stuff to learn.
All right.
And even if it's been said to us in a hurtful way, there can be value in it. So I talked to some people, and then the thing I did, which I always try and do in this kind of situation, and was really helpful, and I find always helps. You remember the verse in the Beatitudes where Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And it's really hard, but actually my experience is that when you pray for the person who has hurt you in that way, or the person who's being negative, the person who's, you know, giving you that really unwarranted criticism, your heart changes towards them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, whatever might have been broken in the friendship or the relationship you had with that person, you can change that by praying for them. And so that would be sort of how I deal with criticism. Zoe, what do you think? What are the hard things in that situation?
There are lots. I possibly do sometimes cry about. Chocolate is another sort of immediate reach for thing for me.
Yes.
But there's something I find myself saying a lot to myself, who naturally would want to be a people pleaser, but that if you spend your life and so much energy trying to control what other people think about you or get their approval, you'll not only die trying, but you'll also die having failed.
Yeah.
And just having that in the front of your head the whole time is really, really helpful. And the thing that also came to my mind, which is very live for us at the moment, and in the social justice campaigning that I do, is that quite often if you do and say things that aren't necessarily the popular thing to do, so if you stand up for a group, or you stand up against some sort of injustice, you can pretty much expect some criticism. And I mean, do you remember the woman who started the campaign to get women on banknotes? And I do think this is really common, particularly for women, that she basically got so many rape threats. And actually she decided to out them, and she spoke publicly about it. And the minute she did that, hundreds of other people said, oh yeah, this is just normal. So I think there's something about when you're trying to do something for a bigger picture, there's always going to be resistance, but also there's always a bit of that sort of tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
But life isn't about just trying to sit back and not rock any boats either.
Yeah.
Particularly for Christians, I'd say.
There's different kinds of criticism, isn't there? When I've been criticised, I try to figure out, what's that person's spirit towards me? Are they looking to build me up, or are they looking to knock me down? And even if they're looking to knock me down, it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're saying is untrue. But there's a whole kind of hairball of stuff that you're trying to kind of get to grips with when someone's criticising you, so that you can respond to them correctly. You can listen where you need to hear it, but also you don't allow any spitefulness to do the damage that it can do. And so that's, I think, why criticism is so hard, because there's not one kind of criticism.
Yeah.
In fact, it can be mixed up. I know certainly, clergy can be the worst when it comes to criticism, but we never criticise. We're exercising our gift of discernment, aren't we? Except really we're just being a bunch of plonkers towards each other.
Yeah.
And so, and I really, and that's what drags ministries down. That's actually what can bring ministries to an end, is if we're too hard on each other. And Jesus is very interesting, because Jesus, in Matthew chapter 5, talks about anger towards each other being a way of murdering each other. He links it to the Ten Commandments. So if our criticism is too heavy and is based in the wrong spirit, we're breaking that commandment of murder, and there's casualties.
I think as well, though, the other thing with being clergy is it's a bit like being a Z-list celebrity, really. And you do get a lot of, well, not a lot, but you do get abuse, you get nonsense. There's one weird guy who lives in town who will stop his van and abuse me occasionally when he sees me. He's a very strange guy. But you do get people like that.
Because you're a sort of semi-public figure, aren't you? As a
yeah,
clergy?
that's right. And I think you do get that. And I think really with criticism, there's two types. There's constructive criticism, where you can take what they say and you can use it in order to improve how you practice as being a human being. You could say, well, that's really helpful. Maybe I'll stop being like that now, and I'll try my best not to do it. And that's constructive. And then there's just abuse.
Yeah.
And I think that abuse is very different to constructive criticism. And I think really, I've got my action figure there of Maximilian Colbert. Oh, just a matter. I had it for Christmas. And I think with Colbert, what he did was how he dealt with criticism and evil. Is he formed a plan, and his plan was to love those who hated him, and to love them more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying at the beginning. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. I wonder, just very briefly, the question's also to expect negativity. And in some ways that's almost harder, isn't it? You know, the difference between someone who's always going, oh, we can't do, oh, I don't think, oh, no. And the person who's like, yes, that's brilliant, and yes, you were great. And how do you deal, I guess you must all have people a little bit like that in your churches. How do you deal with the negative person? Who's not necessarily...
those people.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, those people, the Eeyores.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, I think it's the fundamental Christian value is one of hope. And I think you have to have hope in order to have faith and love. And I think sometimes it's not so much a loss of love or loss of faith, but loss of hope that we have in our society. And I think that we can all be that person where they sit down and go, oh, no, do you want to go out today? No. Do you want to do this? No. And you can be like that. And I think you just end up sucked into yourself, don't you? And I think really what we have to try and do for all of us is try to bring a bit of hope into those situations.
The more practical base, I think there's inevitably going to be things that kind of make you shrink in life, and situations which help you sort of flourish, and that's different for each of us. It's where things like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram things ends up being useful. But one of the sort of top tips that we were given again and again and again in training for this public ministry is to know what drains you, know what feeds you, and make sure your diary's got a healthy mixture.
That's
so actually
very
you with picking up your friend, picking up the phone to your friends, actually that's a place where you can just be you, and that's all that's required. And actually that's always all that's ever required. But actually just noticing where your life is enhanced and where your life is diminished. And just having, even if you can't be self-aware enough about it when you're in it, asking somebody else
People
to keep an eye on that stuff, because it's so potentially.
Very helpful. So I think we have a message there of trying to love those who are opposing us, but also being willing to accept criticism where that's valid, being humble enough to do that, and knowing, as you say, knowing ourselves and what we need to build us up and help us flourish. So I hope that's helpful. I know that's an issue that a lot of people struggle with, is how to deal with criticism, how to let it go, how not to hold on to that sort of negativity. So please do let us know if you've got any further thoughts about that.
Next time we talk about the missing years of Jesus.
Perfect.
Great.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Makes me want to watch.
I'd watch that.
I might not even actually come on the episode next week. I might just watch it.
Stay home and watch,